Hi guys, Ross here from Biker Talk. Today I'm talking to Bruce, who rode a 70-year-old motorcycle over 4,000 kilometres from Perth to Sydney. Tegan, that can't be right.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, apparently you rode from Perth to Sydney. Let's hear about it. Bruce, thanks for joining us on Biker Talk. Mate, really looking forward to having a chat. First of all, tell me a little bit about you, your riding and how long you've been riding.
Well, I'm 64 years old now. I started riding when I was about 16 and have been riding on and off ever since then on various motorbikes, both here and in the UK and Europe. It came about because it was a cheap and easy means of transport back in the day, you know, and the test was real simple back then. You know, it's just ride around the block one way, ride around the block the other way, and when I step out in front of you, I want you to put your brakes on and do an emergency stop, and that was basically it. And he stood and watched me while I disappeared up the road. So, you know, it's pretty simple. I've got a 1936 600cc Panther. I've got a 1947 600cc Panther and a 1980 BMW R100 RS. And I'm just restoring a little Model 85 350cc Panther.
Yeah, nice. Are you, and do you have a favourite?
Probably my 1947 Panther, because I rode that across Australia, and, you know, once you've sat on a motorcycle for 9 days doing 500 kilometres a day, you sort of build an affinity and a trust with it, and you know it's going to get you from A to B without breaking down. What can I tell you? It's basically a 600cc sloper, twin port head, loads and loads of torque, single cylinder, magneto ignition, and it's just a little plonker. You know, its top speed was reputed to be about 72 miles an hour. If I'm doing 60 or 65, I think I'm pushing it. So I'm usually doing 55 to 60 mile an hour on it and just take my time. I've restored it myself, so I've got pretty much 100% faith in it, because everything that needed replacing was replaced, and a lot of stuff that probably didn't need replacing was replaced, because, as I said earlier, where I live, I've got a 100-kilometre ride to get anywhere. So I want something I can jump on, start it, you know, kickstart, of course, and ride it from A to B, being 99% confident it's going to get me there. Completely standard. There's a couple of reasons I struggle with heavily modified motorcycles, because particularly the sort of motorcycles I restore and ride, they are historic vehicles, and I really want people to see how they were built back in the day, and the care and love that went into building them from the manufacturers, because they were basically all hand built. There was no robots or anything that built them. They were built by men, and on the engine cases they've even got the stamps from the guys that built the engines. Well, I live about 100 kilometres from Perth, which is the main city over here in Western Australia, and the closest town is about 10 kilometres, so I basically live in the middle of nowhere, I suppose. And so most of my riding is round country roads, which is what I prefer. Social rider, small groups up to sort of 4 or 5. I do occasionally go on big group rides for vintage motorcyclists. It's just being out on your own. Nobody else around bothering you. You can smell everything that's going on. You can see everything that's going on. And I'm certainly no longer what I'd call a fast rider, because most of my motorcycles are pretty bloody slow. So I just plod around the countryside, admiring the view and thinking about life's rich patterns, I suppose. I don't think I've got a favourite place to ride. If I'm riding the same place all the time, I tend to get a bit bored. So I tend to find different routes, different pathways, somewhere I've not been before, you know, and just do that. And I rarely would jump on a motorcycle unless I'm doing less than 50 to 100 kilometres. You know, just little short stints into town and that. By the time you've got all your gear on, and I've sweated my guts out trying to kickstart the bloody Panther. Actually, that's not true, because it usually starts pretty much first or second kick. But if it doesn't, then, you know, you've got to have a decent ride to recover. The most interesting place would be riding across the Nullarbor.
Why? Why did you think you wanted to ride a 1947 Panther on a ride that was essentially about 45 hours? Why?
4,200 kilometres. several reasons. Number one, I just finished restoring the Panther, and I wanted to see how good it was because I love Panthers. I've got a passion for Panthers. I've restored, I think at the last count, about 8 different Panthers. Secondly, it was my 60th birthday, and I wanted to do something a bit special for being 60, you know. And so I thought, I know, what's the farthest I can ride it? Sydney. And then I thought, well, every year for the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, I've taken part in the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride in Perth. So why don't I actually take on the challenge of riding to Sydney on the Panther, raising some money for DGR, and joining DGR in Sydney and riding the Sydney DGR, Distinguished Gentleman's Ride. We spent from September 2016 to September 2017 planning it and raising money and going to fundraising events. There were several logistical problems with riding the Panther that sort of distance. One is it's only a small bike, so you can't carry a great deal of luggage on it. Secondly, you've got about 180 miles on the full tank of fuel, which is pushing it right to its very limits on some of the distances between fuel stations on the Nullarbor. So I needed to carry extra fuel. So there are all those sorts of things that suddenly started rearing their ugly heads. And I was talking to a guy down at the local markets, and he said, I'll come as your support vehicle, Bruce. And he did. And he just jumped in his ute and managed to grab a trailer, and he followed us across, and he was part of the whole planning. So he joined us right at the very beginning, together with most of the riders. A couple of the riders I approached, one guy had prostate cancer, and I felt that it was important that we had somebody that had suffered from prostate cancer ride with us, so I approached him. Yeah, Jeff was another, he came up to me at the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride in 2016 and said, I'd like to join the ride, Bruce. And I said, well, most welcome to join me, but have you got a particular reason for wanting to join me? And he took his scarf off and he got this big lump on his neck. He said, I've just been diagnosed with throat cancer and it'll give me a goal. I said, look, if you want something to keep you occupied going through your treatment, then let's restore a Panther together and you can ride it. That gave him something to focus on while he was unwell. So, you know, and we got together every month and sat round a dining room table, had lunch together and a few glasses of wine and planned the trip. Well, the whole of it, you know, everybody says to you, Nullarbor is deadly boring, there's nothing to see, but there is so much to see. You can just look out and see for absolutely miles, and you can see the curvature of the earth, and you can take a slight detour and look out into the bight, and you know, and if there's whales, you can see the whales that are frolicking and things. And then going through Adelaide and through the foothills outside Adelaide, it was just beautiful riding through there. And then coming through the Blue Mountains in Sydney was just stunning as well. Just magnificent riding, it really is. The only things that happened, one was the rear stand spring broke on it. So that was rattling along behind me until one of the other riders pulled up alongside me and said, oh, there's sparks coming from the back of the bike, Bruce. I could hear this sort of funny noise above the din of the engine and wearing a helmet and things. So we just pulled over the side of the road, and a bit of fencing wire quickly sorted that out. And I lost a bolt out of one of the mudguard stays, and the tyre wore out. The tyre, you know, I thought I'd get 10,000 Ks out of a tyre. I think I got about 5,000 Ks. We had a guy called Dave Lewis meet us out at Bathurst. So we came in through Bathurst, and we actually rode around Bathurst race circuit. And then he brought us in across Sydney Harbour Bridge. And when you come out of the tunnel and you've got this sort of big bridge in front of you, you don't realise how big it is until you're actually riding on it. It's enormous. It towers above you. Yeah. And we were, so that was sort of, crossing Sydney Harbour Bridge was sort of the end of the ride. And our wives were there to meet us at the end as well. So, you know, you're riding and there's your wife standing there and everybody's cheering and clapping. It was a strange feeling because we'd actually succeeded in what we're doing, in what we intended to do. We'd raised an awful lot of money, 12 months of planning and getting together with these guys every month, and suddenly it was all over. We've done it, you know, and all we had left to do then was to ride the DGR a couple of days later. Yeah, it's great. It really is a good vibe. Yeah, and especially when you get to the end of the ride and you all get together and stand around and chat and look at one another's bikes and talk about your bikes and why you're wearing that jacket. Well worth doing. Everybody should do it, I reckon.
I really hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you'd like to find out more about Bruce and his ride across the Nullarbor, then I'll put a link in the description below to his film, Conversations Beyond the Road. That's all for today, and remember, you can't buy happiness, but you can ride a motorcycle, and that's kind of the same thing.